Good afternoon and welcome to the Office of Special Education Services LEA information session for special education. Today is October 21st, 2025. We have a brief agenda today, but a very important one. Peter has federal updates for us. Lisa McCliment will give us some updates about fall admin, and then we'll hear from our TA Center from SC Teams, the Academic Alliance of South Carolina. Peter, you're up first.
All right. I'm at the task conference, so I'm just finding a spot to be able to do this up in Greenville. So I just wanted to talk about you know, what's happening at the federal level. There's kind of a lot of uncertainty right now with the shutdown and with the news about reduction in force that's been picked up by the news media outlets as far as that goes. Basically, before the shutdown was kind of the last communication we got from any representative within the Office of Special Education Programs at the federal level. They did anticipate the shutdown because it didn't look like there was any agreement that was going to be reached in Congress, and so our representative, who's Rhonda Sortino from the Office of Special Education Programs, just wrote a letter saying, or an email to let the different states that she was the contact for, to let them know that they would be that once the furlough occurred due to the government shutdown, that they would be out of contact, so they wouldn't be responding to email. So it was a courtesy email, and that's the only direct correspondence that we've received from the office since October 1st, when the shutdown took place. After that, what we did, they did proceed with the grants. So for this fiscal year, we have received the funds that were allocated for IDA for the state of South Carolina. So we do have that for this fiscal year, which is good news. So we wouldn't expect another round of funding until next summer, because they typically break it up into a couple different distributions. But so we do have the funding, which is good news for that. So the only news of the reductions in force that happened during the shutdown. So the news media outlets have been covering it, but basically a lot of individuals at the Department of Ed received a reduction in force notice, letting them know that they would basically have employment until December 9th, as I understand it. And the information, like I said, I probably get the same information you do. For the most part, we're not getting anything directly from OSIP or anything about that. We do get some information from NASD, which is the National Association of State Directors of Special Education. So that organization has some people that are located in DC, so they're able to get information from that. And they've talked to a few people that were in OSIP that received a reduction in force notice. And so what NASD has been saying is that it would take the staff down to very few, maybe 4 to 8 employees in the entire Office of Special Education Programs at the federal level, if the reduction in force goes forward. So that's kind of what they were saying. What does that mean? We don't know, because we haven't gotten correspondence yet. So like I said, the Department of Education United States Department of Education hasn't indicated how it'll carry out its activities at this point. There was a lawsuit filed by several federal unions. It was filed in the Northern District of California, in San Francisco, and to basically stop the RIFs, the reduction in force notices, from going forward. That case went for a hearing on a temporary restraining order And the temporary restraining order was granted by the judge to put a stay, to basically say that OMB in the federal government could not proceed with the reductions in force. Now, the stages of injunctive relief in courts go from a temporary restraining order, then you which is basically an immediate thing that's put into place, oftentimes before you have much of a record, because it's at the very beginning of the case, usually asked for at the beginning of the filings, which starts with a complaint. And then the next stage would be to go to a preliminary injunction. That injunction, if granted, would last for the duration of the proceedings until a trial is had or the case works its way out. And then you would end up with potentially a permanent injunction would be the result at the end of the proceedings. And so the temporary restraining order is exactly what it's supposed to be. It's temporary in nature. Judge Ilston, who's the judge on the case, has ordered a hearing for the 28th, so it's next week, to consider the preliminary injunction. Most of the time, the judge will, grant what they granted in the temporary restraining order, but that they could also reverse. It does happen. So we'll see what happens. That's the next stage of it. You can't really appeal a temporary restraining order, but oftentimes you can do an interlocutory appeal on the preliminary injunction. So we'll see. So the next court date in those proceedings is the 28th, and that lawsuit is brought on behalf of the employees, and it's brought on pretty much employment grounds, saying that the reduction in force was not done in accordance with law and therefore needs to be reversed. And these people that were basically given that reduction in force notice need to be reemployed at the district. So it wasn't about the IDA. It reaches broader than just the Office of Special Education Programs. So it's not basically based on any failure to implement the IDA. It's just a challenge to the employment action that was taking place. And I did want to point that out because I think understanding the proceedings and understanding what you're reading is important, especially when you're in this area. I know there's been a lot of concern, and you'll get questions from parents and from the community about what's happening at the federal level. And I think it's important to be informed, and that's the nature of the proceedings right now in court, and what we know about what's taken place at the federal level. It is in contrast. It's interesting because there was kind of two lines of cases that involved the Office of Civil Rights. So there was a lot of attorneys were reduced within OCR. They were laid off in the prior round of layoffs, and they did challenge it. A number of those employees did challenge the layoffs in court. But there was also another line of challenge, which was from the parents and families affected by that. Some of them alleging that they had filed OCR complaints for a substantial time ago, and that they had never been processed or responded to in any manner, which would mean that their allegation was that they're not carrying out the law that they were required to do. So that would be a different line. That's a different harm, and it's a different group of people that are harmed by it. So you can see there could be different lines of cases with different legal rights being enforced at that. So as far as the IDA goes, I think any case of that nature claiming harm to students because there's no OSEP or nobody in OSEP or that claim would be premature, most likely at this point, because the fallout, if there is a fallout that would affect students at the student level, hasn't occurred yet. And so, but to get to the chase on what it means for us in South Carolina and what it means at the district is that the IDA is still in place. All of the obligations that fall upon SEAs and LEAs remain intact. And we have the foundation and the infrastructure to provide services to students with disabilities. We've built that foundation. You guys have built that at your school districts for years and years, and that infrastructure is in place to support the students and provide the services that are necessary. And all of the laws and regulations that affect students with disabilities is still in place. You know, and that's not going to stop. And I think that that's what we need to reassure parents of, that we're committed to this work. We've, you know, dedicated our careers to it. We certainly believe in the infrastructure that we've put into place to make sure that students with disabilities get the services they need to access the general ed curriculum and to advance in their development and their IEP goals. And so that all remains in place. Nothing changes there. The good thing is that we received the funding for this fiscal year. You know, to me, that's probably the biggest area of concern when you hear some uncertainty at the federal level that there'll be some kind of reduction in the amount of funding that we receive. So that's our biggest concern. But at this point, there's been no proposal for that. I did discuss some of the proposals that have been put forth, the alternative proposals that have been put forth on the funding of the IDA. They both call for flat funding. I haven't seen a proposal that calls for anything less than flat funding. So that means we'll get the resources, which means we'll pass it through to you. And so I know there's another round of some supplemental funding going out that we're working on now that'll go out to districts for the current year funding. And so that's where we stand as far as the federal oversight. You know, we don't know what it's going to look like. We'll wait to hear. It's my expectation that once the government reopens, once the federal government reopens and the shutdown ends, that there'll be some information put out as to, you know, how the different activities under the IDA will take place. Things like data collection, you know, our grant application, how are those things going to be processed and things of that nature. But I'm assuming that once the shutdown ends, we'll get information on how that all is going to take place. It may take a little bit of time, but those are the things that are fundamental to know in order for us to do what we need to do at the state level, and then pass it down to you guys as far as the funding and other things as well. So that's what we know. That's what the stage is at. Like I said, I don't think it should interrupt any services for any students at this time. And you know, in the face of uncertainty, it's just important for us to remain steadfast in our goals and then steadfast in what we're trying to do, which is to serve the students of South Carolina. And so we'll continue to do that. And we really shouldn't miss a beat at this point. But if I find out anything else, or if we find out anything at the state level regarding the operations of the Office of Special Education Programs at the federal level, I'll certainly pass that information along. But that's where it stands now. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that.
I don't see anything in the chat, Peter.
Right.
All right.
Heavy topics. Certainly something we've never seen before, which would be a you know, a drastic change at the federal level. And you know, the Office of Special Education Programs has certainly been the office administering IDA as long as I've been involved in IDA, and so it's been a number of years. So you know, it's I think it's disconcerting to parents and some of the community as to, you know, if that office is no longer staffed, you know, what happens, and you know, does the law go away? But the answer is no, it doesn't, and it will continue to be implemented by states and by school districts. There might be less support from the federal level, but we have yet to see what it's going to entail at this point. All right, well, if anybody has any questions, you can put it in the chat, but we can move along to the next topic.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Lisa, you are next.
Thanks, Sarah. Just a reminder, we've gotten lots and lots of registrations for the Fall Special Ed Administrators Conference, November 6th or 12th. We got a few that may be registered for both. It's the same agenda. It's just with everybody having different fall breaks and different conferences and stuff, we're kind of giving you two options. And so it's at the Phillips Market Center, and just some of the information we already gave you. 8:30 check-in. It goes from 9 to 4. And we're doing be a data detective kind of conference this year with our IDEA data center and the WEIS Center, which is Austin Ferrier, and our own Fred Adora, who used to be in our office, and Mary Watson from National Center for Systemic Improvement. We'd like to end registration Friday. So if you haven't registered and you want to come, if you can get that registration in by Friday. This year's registration, you can pick your lunch choice, and we need to get that to lunches from DePrado's, and we just need to get them a count, very specific count, so they have that. And then the info session on November 18th, we're extending it. It's going to run from 2 to 4, and it's going to have Peter and Barbara updates that usually kind of happen at our conference, but because we're having our TA centers do the conference, we're going to do a follow-up for the conference, and then Peter and Barbara's updates at that time in November. We have had, I think, of all the districts that have registered, and we have had 9 districts that you've one or more of your people have registered different date. Like maybe you have 5 people register for the 6th, and then 2 people register for the 12th. And while we're good with that, if that's the only way it works for you, but it might be beneficial for your whole team to be at the conference on the same day, because you're going to be looking into your own district data, having time to kind of talk about and analyze your own data. So if you want to make any changes to dates, just drop Sarah an email, and she can make any changes if you want to do that. And I know for some of you, you don't want everybody gone on the same day if you don't have to. But the purpose of the conference is for your team to kind of work together on your data. So just that information, but we're fine if you want to choose, split your team up. But just so you're aware. Any questions? We're excited to have everybody. I think we've got 207 people registered already, so that's awesome. Okay, Sarah, thank you.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Next up, we have the Academic Alliance of South Carolina.
Hi, everyone. This is Deanna Parish. I'm also coming live from the task conference, so I apologize if there's any background noise, but we wanted to share with you guys an upcoming MTSS series in November. We have registration open now. Do you have data? It should say data, not a date. We hope you have a date, but have data yet. And this would be a great follow-up for what you're doing at the Fall Admin Conference, looking at data, thinking about data. So this is going to be at the Lexington II Performing Arts Center. Registration open now, so you can click or scan the QR code to register for that. Other upcoming events for October, we have 2 communities of practice still on the books, the teacher toolkit coming up on the 23rd, and the database problem solving. Check out these resources that we have. Our toolkit for Academic Alliance. This little QR code, this link has all of our resources in it. Really great one to capture if you're sharing out with your district, and it is divided into our systems for sustainability and our practices across the tiers. So if you're looking to dig into certain things at the district level, you want to grab that toolkit. And then of course, our resources that support MTSS. And then our social media coordinator, who is Dr. Susan Thomas, is always looking for new friends. We would love for you to follow us on any of our social media to see what we're up to. And our calendar, everything you can find here that we're doing is on our calendar. Any of the registrations for live events, community of practices, webinars, you can go to our calendar and have a one-stop shop here. I think I have one more. Oh yeah, our newsletter. We were lucky to have a lot of people come by and talk with us at the TASK conference and got a lot of new subscribers. So we hope one of those will be you. If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, it will be coming out soon. And I think that's all for me, Sarah.
It is. Thank you, Deanna. I'm just going to remind everyone our next date, as Lisa already mentioned, is November 18th. I should have put on here that it is going to be an hour longer than usual. We're going to start at 2 o'clock, so it'll be from 2 to 4, and that way it'll give both Peter and Barbara Drayton time to give the updates that they normally might give at a fall admin, but our day is already packed with all the data information. And that's the end of our meeting. So if there are no questions, you can have another 40 minutes of your day back.